Ireland are good. Really good. Amazingly good. Very, very good. This is something that you would have heard many people say, like Squid Rugby, pundits, the media, and even analysts. Ireland don't have many weaknesses. And this is true. I kid you not, I could not find a single stat in any meaningful category where Ireland are bad. That could give us any indication where Ireland's weaknesses might lie. And because of this, I had to really go dig deeper and look at their games against Scotland and England to really see what the Springboks could target. And even in those games, there weren't a lot of weaknesses. However, I did see something that the Springboks could target, and if they are successful, it could be very rewarding for them. Look at this example against England. The Irish defensive line is extremely aggressive, and they put a lot of pressure on the first receiver. This is good and all, but look at the massive gap that is forming on the inside. And this is Ireland's main weakness. Their defensive line is extremely aggressive in the middle of the field. This gives them a lot of advantages if they make their tackles, but because it's so aggressive, their defenders can become disconnected. And the way that England dealt with this was by having a lot of attacking lines off of the first receiver. And this did actually lead to a few line breaks throughout the game. So if you do have a ball carrier with a lot of good handling skills and decision making sprinkled in, this is potentially a big problem for Ireland. There are 3 reasons why I think the Springboks could actually target this weak area. The first reason is that when we look at the Springboks game against Wales, they actually had a lot of attacking lines off of their ball carriers, specifically the first receiver and Faf. This is very different to the way that the Springboks played in the World Cup, where we were a little bit more focused on the kicking game and the pressure game. And if you look at Edward van der Merwe's try, this is exactly why it worked. There were multiple attacking angles. The second reason is Faf. Now, I've made a video covering this topic before, so please go check that out. But essentially, Faf against Wales was very active around the ruck. He was constantly looking for gaps to exploit. He was constantly picking up the ball and drawing defenders before offloading. He was just a general nuisance around the ruck. And I think this was done by design, because this would mean that Ireland would have to worry about one more thing around the ruck. And there could be multiple defenders drawn out of position and create gaps that the Springboks could exploit. And the final reason is that Quagga was selected to start at 8th man. Now, Quagga brings a lot of experience to the table. That's definitely a reason over someone like Evan Rus. But he also brings a lot of attacking threat as well. As a former Sevens player, his handling is superb. He understands the game when there's space. And I just wonder if we're going to see him be a pivotal part in the Springbok attack on Saturday. He could be used as the primary carrier in a lot of the Springbok pods, where he would constantly be threatening to give the offload, for example. Another thing that we could see is that he might potentially even slot into that first receiver position, which would give the Springboks another attacking threat off of the ruck. Now, I think this is really only going to work if the Springboks attack more flat. If the Springboks do attack from deep, I think it's going to give the Irish defenders just a little bit more time to really plug these spaces, and the threat just won't be there as much. The Springbok forwards also aren't really as explosive as the Irish forwards, so I don't think even if they attack from deep and there is space, I don't think it's going to be as effective. But if the Springboks attack flat, it means that there's always that threat of making gain line meters given how powerful the Springbok forwards are. And I think this is going to bait the Irish forwards to really get up off the line very quickly, and at that point, if there can be multiple attackers coming off of support lines, we might even see a few line breaks, if they're smart. Now, Andy Farrell probably knows about this. I don't see why he wouldn't, and there's a few ways that they could deal with this. The first is that they just really keep it as is. They don't change anything. And the reason for this is because it's a new tactic for the Springboks. So they might be looking at this and saying, okay, cool tactic, but can you do it against very good opposition? The Springboks were successful in this, but it was against a very weak Welsh side. So Ireland might call their bluff and say, you know what, try it. And then the Springboks might not have the skills to pull it off. I'd love to hear your opinion, but I do think that the Springboks actually have the skills to pull it off, specifically if you look at someone like Sasha, who could be coming off of the bench if we assume that he's not going to replace Willie. And of course, if there aren't any other injuries. But if the Springboks don't have the handling skills needed, then, I mean, it's going to be very bad, because there's going to be a lot of handling errors probably. And probably a lot of handling errors with turnovers and counterattacks. The second way that Andy Farrell could deal with this is just the boring way, which is saying, well, we're going to do a middle ground. So we're not going to be quite as aggressive. We're also not going to be very conservative. We're going to take that middle ground. And even though there might be a gap, there's probably going to be enough time for us to make up for it. And then the last way, which is probably the most interesting way, is that they could decide to be very conservative in their defense. Now, if they do this, it means that the Springboks are going to be less likely to make a line break. They'll probably have a lot of attacking momentum, but because the Irish will prioritize a lot of defensive cohesion and a lot of connections between defenders, it means that the Springboks are going to have to go through a lot of phases to really get any sort of big reward from their attacks. This might actually prompt the Springboks to really transition into the kicking game, and this might suit Ireland a little bit more. What we could see from this example is the Springboks getting into a bit of a rut on attack and then transitioning more into a kicking game. And this might actually suit Ireland a little bit more. Ireland are really known for being an amazing attacking team, and that is fair, but a really underrated aspect of their game is their kicking game. They have a lot of world-class kickers, and if you look at their territorial stats, they tend to be very territorially dominant. So Ireland might decide to defend a little bit more with a drift and defend a bit more passively, and I don't think this is really going to shoot them in the foot. I think that they can make up for it in other areas like the kicking game. Now, it is important to mention that this video assumes that South Africa will target this area. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just decide that we're going to play like we did in the World Cup, and we're going to focus a little bit more on the kicking game, cross-field bombs, box kicks, these types of things to really march our opponents back. So that could happen, but I don't know. I think that there are a lot of signs pointing to this being an aspect that we could see in this game. Maybe not all the time, but at certain moments. But I could be wrong. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was fun and insightful in some ways. And yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Cheers.